Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast today on the 6th of April 2019, and I wanted to discuss the upcoming election and the tech companies and how they're going to be used in order to manipulate the outcome and manipulate it during the process against us. So we have two big elections that are coming up. We've got the federal election that's coming up in a few months, and then we have in just a few days there's going to be the Alberta election, where the Albertans are going to try and oust Rachel Notley in favor for Jason Kenney. It really seems to come down to those two big important elections that are going to be coming up. And the one thing that is always going to play a big role, it has played a big role in elections for the last decade pretty much, has been social media. Now, we all know how the ruling class operates. They don't like to play fair. They don't like to play fair because they are determined to keep their positions of power, and in order to do so, they are going to manipulate the social media, big tech companies, any way that they can in order to ensure that they maintain the power. As it's quite clear from late that not many people are supporting Justin Trudeau, so him and his owners are going to do everything they can to make sure that the message doesn't really get out. And you can see this if you've been paying attention to the type of news stories that have been coming up over the last year or maybe 2 years when it concerns to the Trudeau government's interest when it comes to tech companies, Facebook, Twitter, Google. So they're going to do everything that they can in order to censor these platforms. Now, coming up on a year ago, maybe about 10 months ago now, I put out a video that was called Rigging the Game Trudeau Style. And you can see it right there. That's outlined in the red. And in that video, I put it out about a week before the Ontario election. And I was showing how there was a hashtag that was running around on Twitter at the time called Ontario Election Integrity. And in that hashtag, I was showing how there was people who were canvassing door to door, people who were involved in the political process, were actually connected all the way back to the Trudeau government or the Ontario Liberals. And because of this, it showed how this was a conflict of interest in the upcoming election. There was more to it. I went into details about the tech companies themselves and the role that they are playing and the role that big data plays. And this is something that the Trudeau government has been pushing for even more lately. And let's just go over again some of these connections that we're talking about. So this was actually what you're going to be seeing here are graphics that I used for this video. And one thing I want to point out, these are the tech companies right now, and we're going to get more into the individuals behind it. But what you're seeing right here is we want to point your attention to this Canadian flag that you're seeing up there, the maple leaf. That is Canada 2020. Canada 2020 is a progressive think tank, and it's been pretty closely associated with Justin Trudeau. And it's owned, it's the person who runs it is Thomas Pitfield. Thomas Pitfield has been a childhood friend to Justin Trudeau. And Canada 2020 has done they've been in collaboration with the Censor for American Progress, which is owned by John Podesta, a Democrat. They've done many sort of conferences together, but connected to this is also Data Science Inc., which is over there, is the line that connects it on the right. And Data Science is also another company that is owned by Thomas Pitfield, and they've received lucrative contracts from the Canadian government in order to do data science, data research for the Liberal government. And the thing is if you really try and trace it back, you won't find much that Data Science has done. I mean, it really only got started up after Justin Trudeau became the leader of the Liberal Party, and they've only done government contracts ever since he became the Prime Minister. So it seems like there's a clear conflict of interest there. And Data Science itself can be traced back to the Liberalist server. The Liberalist server is, you can see this is from the page of the Liberalist server. It was a server that is used in order, as they describe it, the Liberal Party describes it, it was created in order to track voter information. So this would be how many people in a selective riding, and then the demographics of that riding, the family size, which way that these people are going to be voting, so that way they can, as they would describe it, it was a way for them to figure out which ridings are they're guaranteed to win, which ridings they need to do more work on, more door-to-door, more calling in order to try and get people on their side, and also which ridings are pretty much they're guaranteed to lose, so that way they didn't focus on these ridings because they were guaranteed to lose. Now, this is what they're talking about, but I have no doubt in my mind that the real point of the Liberalist server has been in order to collect information on Canadian citizens. And when in this day and age, information is power. It's not just money, but if you have the information on your demographics, then you can campaign against them in a way that's important. So one that is probably going to come up has to do in this election is going to be immigration. So you can kind of see who's on the cuff, who's not really crazy about the number of immigrants coming over right now, and then you can sort of play to get them on your side. This is one way that could work. It could also work in terms of climate change. See who is skeptical about it, and then you can sort of play it up, maybe play up the fears, the propaganda that comes with climate change, in order to try and persuade them to be on your side. And if you can persuade them that there's a problem, for instance, in climate change, then you can actually persuade these people that you're the only party that can fix this problem, and for that very reason, you need to vote for them. This is exactly what the NDP in Ontario are trying to do right now when it comes to the education, because we know that for those living in Ontario, and for those outside who don't know, right now there's a big controversy that's going on in Ontario about education because Doug Ford wants to make cuts to the education system, which are necessary. I believe they're mostly going into the administration side, but there are teachers' positions that are going to get cut. So they're trying to play up on this fear to get people on the side of the NDP is the main one that are doing this, but so are the Ontario Liberals. So this is what I believe that we're really doing with the Liberalist server. It's not just collecting information on ridings, but it's going much more into details. But the connection that can go back all the way to Justin Trudeau through Canada 2020 data science is quite startling. As we can see here, so if we look towards the left where there's the maple leaf, that's Canada 2020. We can see that there is Thomas Pitfield on there as he's named out. Thomas Pitfield is married to a woman named Anna Gainey. And Anna Gainey, until maybe about a year ago at most, she was the president of the Federal Liberal Party of Canada. So it's showing how there's Trudeau's friend is the one who's collecting all of the data itself. And then we also see how he is married to the former president of the Liberal Party, which again connects all the way back to Justin Trudeau. Then we have two other names on there, Tim Barber and Susan Smith, who are also members who have worked with Canada 2020, but they worked with Blue Sky Strategy Group. Now, Blue Sky Strategy Group it's a organization that is meant to it deals with public affairs. So when people run into a controversy, you hire Blue Sky Strategy Group, and they're supposed to put a spin on the media in order to guarantee, change the narrative a little bit, change the story so that way you don't look as bad. And one way you can see him in action was Jian Ghomeshi. For those who remember the old host of the show Q from CBC, Jian Ghomeshi hired Blue Sky Strategy Group in order to change the narrative of the story that was going out there about how he was an abuser and he liked violent sex, that sort of thing. And because of it, they may have actually been responsible for one of the reasons that he actually didn't get charged with anything, because he changed the perspective of everyone out there, and they were probably effective at changing the perspective of the judges. And I think his trial was by jury as well. I could be wrong on that part. I'd have to double check that. But they have connection, Tim Barber and Susan Smith, going back to Thomas Pitfield as well. So it's a nice big circle that we have here. You don't have to worry too much about Ensight there, and that's Enterprise at the bottom, just because that was more connected back to when I was discussing my video, when we were discussing rigging the game Trudeau style. It was an important story for that. But these were these were companies that was involved and people that were involved with the public service pool, which was being used in order to canvass voters and knock on doors, this sort of thing. So, and many of them lead back to either Ontario Liberals or the federal Liberals. So there's always manipulation that is going on there. Now, the main reason that I bring this sort of information up is because we're seeing how they're trying to manipulate social media once again, including Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Now, Facebook and Twitter are the biggest social media platforms out there, so they can manage to manipulate these platforms. Then that is going to be very effective if they can censor certain points of view, which we already know for a fact that both these sites do. We know that Twitter is pretty much... They haven't more or less admitted to it, but Project Veritas undercover video shows that they were more or less manipulating conservatives and right-wing personalities for making them shadow banned and even knocking them off the platform. That's pretty much been confirmed. And even Tim Pool, when he went on the Joe Rogan podcast, he sort of again shined a light on this. I think he could have gone further or hammered them a little bit harder, but it is what it is, and he did a better job than Joe Rogan really did in the original one. So this is exactly what they're doing. But even when we're talking about the Liberalist server, that has been connected back to the Democratic Party in the U.S. as well. Not just that through its association with Canada 2020 and its Canada 2020's association with Center for American Progress. Not even in that way. But the main way, which we might see on here, yeah, at the very bottom of this picture, if you can see, even underneath where it says login, you can see it says 2018 NGP Van. Now, NGP Van has been the software that has been used by the Democratic Party for most of their Democratic campaigns. This includes Bernie Sanders 2016, Hillary Clinton 2016, Barack Obama in 2008, and also in 2012. And I believe Elizabeth Warren has also used this, and many other Democrats as well has used NGP Van as their software. It links all the way back to the Democratic Party, but it's also powering the Liberalist server at the same time. So we're having more of a connection there. But right now, what we're hearing all over the news has to do with foreign interference. That's been the big story over the last few days, maybe the last week at most. As we can see here, it says, Canada expects foreign meddling in October election. Chrystia Freeland says, our judgment is that interference is very likely, Canada Foreign Affairs Minister says. So, as this article goes on to say, it says Global Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland said on Friday it's likely that foreign actors would meddle in the country's October elections, and her British counterpart said that a deterrent to stop countries like Russia from interfering was critical. U.S. intelligence officials and the governments of some European Union countries have accused Russia of interfering in their election in recent years, allegations strongly denied by Moscow. Now, this is something that's going to happen. There's no way that there's going to be and Moscow is going to admit that, but it works both ways. I have no doubt that in some ways Russia has tried to influence the elections, but it's not like it doesn't work the other way around, and that Canada and America and other Western countries aren't getting involved in other countries to manipulate their elections and the way that their politics works. I mean, this happened in Ukraine, actually. A lot of people were talking about how Russia was interfering with the Crimea vote, in where they were voting to either stay with Ukraine or defect to Russia. And, they were saying that Russia played an interference in this. Well, so did the U.S. in that whole situation. The CIA was very much involved with everything that went down in Crimea, and so was Israel as well. Actually, just in general, when we're talking about the whole Ukraine situation, which still affects people in that country to today. I've also done a video not too long ago where I was showing, discussing how that what's going on in Venezuela right now is also being manipulated by the U.S., and now Russia's gotten involved in that. So Russia's siding with Maduro. The U.S. is siding against Maduro with, I can't remember that new guy, but that guy who claims that he is the new president of Venezuela. That is the side that is being backed by them, and many of the similar players are there right now in Venezuela, so it works both ways. But the thing is everybody's leaving out countries such as China, which is probably the biggest problem when it comes to hacking. They actually have a pretty sophisticated, sophisticated technological side of their military. So that was one way where I could see that there would be interference more than China and Russia maybe, but more China would be my biggest fear. And even people talk about how North Korea has that sort of capabilities too. And it goes on to say, when asked whether she was worried Russia would interfere in the election, Freeland said she was very concerned. Of course, this is also playing up on what has been the narrative over the last couple of years, which is that the Russians got Donald Trump put into the White House. This is what exactly the sort of thing that the Trudeau government has played up on ever since Trump came in office, which is probably also why there's been some tension there between the U.S. and Canada recently. But that is something that they're, even now, even after the reports that have come out, the Mueller report getting released, which it shows that there is not that connection that they're talking about. Despite that, they're still playing up on this whole situation. But one of the key players in this attempt to censor social media has been Christina Gold. Christina Gold has been the one that has been the public face when it comes to the Canadian government regulating social media, and I've said time and time again here that the online through Facebook and Twitter is where the main resistance to Justin Trudeau is. It's not going to be from the mainstream media, and even, there are people now who are starting to talk about this in public, but even then, I find that as I go through my day-to-day, and I hear what people have to say, it's still not really in the public discussion. But where it is very prominent is online. This is the main reason they need to censor it. Where has populism been growing? Online. Where have these recent leaders really made their impact? Online. They don't have to go through the mainstream media anymore, who have been the old guards of the globalists and the elites and the owners of our countries for a long time, which is why they've been fighting back so hard against people like us, against the alternative media, against people like PewDiePie, who actually make an impact because we can circumvent those old forms of propaganda, that old form of censorship, in order to actually get information out there that we wouldn't be told otherwise. But anyway, minister tasked with safeguarding election calls on committee to look at regulating Facebook and Twitter, two of the biggest social media accounts. Gold invites committee to study regulations or legislation in lead up to federal election. This is from February 19th, 2019. As it says here, Democratic Institution Minister Karina Gold today called on a Commons committee to look at the possibility of the Canadian government imposing new rules on social media sites such as Facebook and Twitter in the lead up to the next federal election. Now, if they're imposing these rules, do you really think that it's going to affect them, their message, and their base? Probably not. But where it will affect is where they see as probably foreign media is one, which is, it's possible that foreign media does try and to change the way that we were looking at our elections. So if they got a candidate that they don't like, they're probably going to push some stories through that would say that this candidate is bad. But where I really think this is going to take effect is the fact that they're probably going to push and say, and probably extend that even farther and say that anybody who's pushing controversial messages or conspiracy theories, like they've already done on YouTube, will then be silenced because of it. Well, then we have a big problem, because anything that the government puts out is not going to be considered radical. It's not going to be considered conspiracy theory, but anybody who fights back against that are suddenly now in that crosshair. So it's not going to affect the government, but she goes on to say, I would encourage this committee to study the roles of social media in democracy. If that is something you think is interesting, to hold the social media companies to account. I would welcome suggestions and feedback in terms of how to appropriately regulate or legislate that behavior, because I think one of the biggest challenges, and you can see this around the world, is the path forward is not clear. Well, it was through these social media accounts, mainly Twitter, where Donald Trump was able to get his message out, and that's where people rallied to him, who were his supporters. It doesn't really matter whether you like Trump or not. That's just a fact. And because of that, he was able to circumvent the mainstream media, which was giving him terrible articles and terrible interviews every time that he went on there. And he could also, if they put out something that was inaccurate against him, he could then take to Twitter, get his message out to millions of followers, millions of people who could then spread that message so that way people can counter it. And this actually, when the more that the media did this, the more and more damage it did to their own image, and also the more damage it did to the candidate that they were supporting, mainly Hillary Clinton, because we had CNN hosts coming out like the day before the 2016 election saying that they couldn't have done anything more to help Hillary Clinton. This is the main reason that they want to silence this, is because between people, the alternative media, just regular people talking, and even candidates who will come out and spread their message online, they can't allow this. But it goes on. Gold says Feds putting pressure on social media giants to act responsibly in lead up to vote. Facebook representative in Ottawa, Kevin Chan, says the social media giant is expected to have external oversight council up and running by the end of 2019. This is probably just going to be in time for the actual election itself. And why does Kevin Chan play such a significant role in this? Well, he is the member, he's the Facebook's representative in Canada. He can lobby the government without actually having to register as a lobby group. We saw this last year during the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal. And he holds a lot of power over Facebook here in Canada. He used to work for the Liberal Party way back when, before he got involved with Facebook. But then on top of that, he actually has shared a stage with Karina Gold in the past. That's Kevin Chan there, and that's Karina Gold. So it's not like it's coming from an impartial place. They know each other, and they know each other pretty damn well. So the censorship that we're going to see is going to be, it's going to push more of the mainstream media, more of the mainstream point of view. And if you have any sort of rebuttal to that, you're just going to get suppressed underneath everything. And it goes even further. And this is, I think, this article here kind of shows the extent that they were going to, and the game that they're trying to play. Hold on, quick drink. So as it says here, Gold wants Google to change its mind about refusing election ads. She also says she could regulate social media platforms that don't take the steps on bot accounts. And we can just get into bots than the whole thing later. But as it says here, Democratic Institution Minister Karina Gold says she's trying to persuade Google to change its mind about refusing to run election advertising during the upcoming federal campaign. Speaking in an interview with CBC News, Gold suggested that Google's decision to stop accepting political advertising during the upcoming federal election, instead of developing an online ad registry, may not be final. It won't be final because she said so. Gold says Google did set up an ad registry for the U.S. midterm election and is planning one for the upcoming European Union parliamentary elections. Now, this is where the important part is. Gold says she wants online platforms to start developing the ad registries called in the recent changes to Canada's election law. She also is still contemplating the prospect of regulating social media platforms if they don't make other changes she is seeking. So the regulations are going to come in if they don't make the changes, these social media companies don't make the changes that the government wants. That's rigging the game in their favor. That's rigging the game Trudeau style. And this is the best way to do it. You've got the biggest search engine in the world it's been proven to bury stories. It's been proven that they will bury stories if they doesn't line up with their political ideology. We've heard all about Google's political ideology. We've heard all about Twitter and Facebook's political ideology. So we have the biggest search engine. We have the two biggest social media accounts, too, that are now going to be working with the government to censor what the government wants. And this is why platforms such as Gab ended up coming up. But then you even see the censorship with a platform like Gab that had the ISP provider, the internet service providers, pull the domain name from them simply because they didn't like Gab. I mean, even during the podcast that Tim Pool did on Joe Rogan with Jack Dorsey, he ended up talking about this because they said that after the synagogue shooting, Gab got pulled down because the guy was posting on Gab. He also had a Facebook, he also had a Twitter account, however, but this was not affected whatsoever. Now, we have that, but then on top of that, he says if you take the numbers of what is considered hate speech on Gab and on Twitter, Gab has about 5% of what they put out is hate speech. Twitter is about 2.5%, I think. But then when Twitter has millions upon millions upon millions more people on its platform than Gab, then they're actually pushing more of what they consider hate speech than Gab does. But this never comes down on it. We just had a few weeks ago, the guy who shot at the mosque in New Zealand. He ended up posting, he live streamed it to Facebook, but was Facebook taken down? No, that didn't end up happening. Although they did say that they're going to take white nationalists off it. So that is a change. Problem with that, though, is anybody can be a white nationalist these days. But what about nationalists from other races? What about the Black Panthers who are black nationalists? Are they going to be taken down? Probably not. So we have here from Variety, Facebook Mark Zuckerberg says we need new rules regulating political speech. As Mark Zuckerberg ended up saying in an interview with ABC News, the current laws around what is political advertising don't consider discussion issues to be political. It's not clear to me what we want. It's not clear to me that we want a private company to be making the kind of fundamental decisions about what is political speech and how it should be regulated. That seems like something. That seems like something there should be a more democratic process around. So Mark Zuckerberg is trying to push that we should have government regulations on it. But this should tell you all you need to know is the fact that, one second, from Real Clear Politics, we should worry when Zuckerberg Dems start agreeing. And this is exactly what has ended up happening. It says, as this part says here, let's be perfectly clear. Every single regulatory measure Zuckerberg is calling would benefit his company, his political allies, and himself personally. At best, regulations would just deflect from the unsavory practices of Facebook and its competitors. At worst, it would enlist government sponsorship for those practices. Democratic Senator Mark Warner greeted Zuckerberg's announcement by saying he was glad to see that the era of social media Wild West is over. It's actually been over for a long time, but this is actually an extremely disturbing thing for him to end up saying about the whole situation. And we see the censorship that is trying to come out from the Democrats right now. We see the censorship that is coming out from the liberals. They're two peas of a pod. They're both globalist parties. They're pushing for very similar platforms right now. So you can see why this is a problem already. And the Democrats and the liberals have been one of those core political parties for the political elites, for the owners of this country, who they support, because it lines up with what the owners of the world really want, and that has to do with open borders, more censorship, pushing towards a more socialized world, because if you have a socialized world, then they control everything, whether that's cash flow, whether that's resources, and that's probably one of the bigger ones these days. Actually, resources is probably going to be the more important one. They have a bunch of cash, but if they can control the resources, you control people's livelihood. If you control the oil, if you control the food, if you control the water, then you control people's lives and their mobility. So this is why they would be more teamed up with the actual left than they would be the right. But don't be confused. There's plenty of Republicans, plenty of conservatives who are involved in this plan too. And it wouldn't surprise me if we're talking Canada, even though it's a fairly new party, it wouldn't surprise me if members of the PPC were involved with this too. It really wouldn't. But if the government was willing to put so much censorship and regulation in, because of so much censorship, so much regulation into place, simply because they are worried about foreign interference, then why have Liberal senators and the independent senators in Canada's Senate, and we know that the independent senators have actually sided with Trudeau more than the Liberal senators have. And even though Trudeau appointed these independent senators, he was trying to pretend like it was actually about having bipartisan works in the Senate in that way. If they're independent, then that's perfect. But they've actually been more on Trudeau's side with what he's pushed than the actual Liberal senators himself. But they've been blocking a bill that ended up coming in. That was, we can see here, senators appointed by Justin Trudeau are blocking passage. Oh fuck! Hold on. They're blocking passage of a bill. And this bill would have taken out foreign interference in Canadian elections. Bill S-239, because it was a bill that was started in the Senate. Bill S-239 was put forth by Senator Linda Frum, who has been speaking out for a long time about the real threat of foreign money manipulating Canada's elections. She absolutely has, and it's this one right here. Now, it's not finished. It's not like this has been defeated in the Senate yet. It's still a possibility that this is something that could get pushed through. But if the voting keeps going, if the debates keep going in the way that it has been going so far, then you can guarantee that it is going to get struck down by the Liberals and the independent senators in the upper chamber, in the red chamber. And the final thing I want to leave you with today is the fact that they've been talking about, when they talk about censorship, foreign interference, and bots. That was a big one that was brought up just a little bit earlier, was the bots. Well, lately, and maybe it's just because of the political bias bubble that I live in on Twitter, that I'm not really following too many lefties or anything like that, but I'm seeing a lot of left-wing bots right now, bot accounts that are working together, and you can just tell. This came out just yesterday, April 5th. It says, Canada fears foreign interference in October election. Chris, Minister of Smartassery, great account by the way, he says, I fear liberal interference. Online liberal bots claiming Canadian and protesters are racist international votes. They have consistently lied to Canadians on many issues. Use some media to discredit opposition, censorship of social media. We have more to fear from them than Russia. And as you can just see here, he's documented a bunch of different cases where these people are saying the exact same thing. Every single one of these accounts are saying the exact same thing. Thank you, McLeod Bibeau and Justin Trudeau, for upholding the Canada Dev commitment to end polio with a pledge of $100 million to GPE. They all said the exact same thing. There is absolutely no way that you could pull this sort of thing off. I mean, this is going back a while, because this is like back in 2017. But why would they be saying the exact same thing unless they were actual bots themselves, bot accounts? So you see why they actually want to manipulate social media, why they want to censor it. It's because we're starting to fuck up their plan. And they can't allow that. They can't allow plebs such as us, like little peasants such as us, to fuck up the plans that they have. But in fact, I find that their choice of Justin Trudeau may have done that itself, because the more and more that Justin Trudeau has been making a fool of himself and just pushing for these radical policies and acting like it's no big deal, not listening to Canadians whatsoever, Canadians are waking up to this. And then when they start hear people talk about Agenda 2030, well, the immigration crisis, that's part of Agenda 2030. Pushing to more socialize the resources, that's Agenda 2030. People start researching this. And they start waking up slowly and slowly. Not fast enough for my liking, to be perfectly honest. But they're starting to see what's going on. and that might actually be the undoing of everything that's going on, the left wing of politics in Canada, because it's been getting destroyed recently. I mean, I think this federal election will be the big teller of it, because we have Quebec's got destroyed, the Liberal Party got destroyed, Ontario's Liberal Party got destroyed. We'll end up seeing what happens in Alberta, but I'm guessing it's going to be a landslide for Jason Kenney. He's going to win a majority government. All over the country, left-wing governments are being destroyed because people are seeing the damage that it's starting to do and the lack of care that they have for the individual people. So I think we're going to have a landslide victory for Jason Kenney over in Alberta, and I think that the Conservatives will probably, if everything keeps going the way it has with Justin Trudeau, it's probably going to end up being a Conservative majority victory. Now all we got to do, if that happens, would be to weed out the globalists and the red Tories that are sitting inside the Conservative Party, because there are many. That is very clear. I mean, don't forget, it was like, what was his name? Michael Chong, I think, who was running for the Conservative Party of Canada a couple years ago, who ended up saying that he would implement a carbon tax, which is just a cash grab. We're already starting to see it ever since the beginning of this month. So there's a huge number in left-wing parties, but don't be fooled, they're also in the right-wing parties, and we have to weed those people out. Because if you don't, then all we're doing is going down the same road. It just depends on the speed that we're going down that road. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you all soon for another video. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion.